when you have an hydrocarbon or cane wherein you remove the hydrogen atom and this hydrogen atom is replaced by OR group. I'll repeat again. When in an alkane the hydrogen is replaced by an OR group, this will become ROR. This is called as an ether. Now what is this OR? This is an oxygen with the alkyl group. This group is called as alkoxy group. And what is this? This is my alkyl group. Why? Because one hydrogen from my normal alkane has been replaced. So this remains my alkyl group. Now to begin with the detailing of ethers, first we should know what are the different types of ethers that we know of. So I'll talk about classification. There are two types of ethers. First is a simple or a symmetrical ether. Now what are these? This is when there are two R groups, both the alkyl groups are same. That means, for example, if I say this was ROR, I will put both the alkyl groups to be same. This is my symmetrical or simple ether. Now I can also say that this is my ethyl on one side. After oxygen I again have ethyl. So I have same alkyl group on both sides of the oxygen atom. This is a simple or symmetrical ether. Now what about the other one? The other one is called as mixed or unsymmetrical ether. Now as the name suggests, both the R groups are different. For example, I can say I have a methyl group and an ethyl group on the other side. Now the R group on both the sides of oxygen are different, so these are called as mixed or unsymmetrical ethers. Similarly, I can say this is also a unsymmetrical ether. Now what is this group? In the previous videos also I have discussed that C6H5 group is called as phenyl group. What is phenyl group? It is one hydrogen less than the benzene ring. Right? So what are simple ethers where both the alkyl groups are same? What are unsymmetrical ethers where both the alkyl groups are different? Now let's talk about the structure of ethers. Now this is the basic structure of an ether. This is the simplest one, right? Now if I compare it with the other two, that was alcohols and phenols, the structures are like these. This is my alcohol, this is my phenol, and this is my ether. Right, now we all know that the oxygen in all three of them, is sp3 hybridized. Right, so whenever an atom is sp3 hybridized, the expected hybridization is always sp3. Expected hybridization whenever it is sp3, the shape is tetrahedral. Right, so I should believe that all these three structures of alcohol, phenol and ethers wherein the oxygen is sp3 hybridized, they should be having a tetrahedral arrangement. Now what is the tetrahedral angle? Tetrahedral angle is 109.2 degrees. Now when we discussed the alcohols, I told you that here the angle is a little less than 109.2 degree, which is the tetrahedral angle. Now why? So out of the 4 bonds which a tetrahedral structure should have, right, sp3, so there has to be 4 bonds. So out of the 4 bonds which a tetrahedral structure should have, in this case the 2 bonds are formed and there are 2 lone pairs. Oxygen is supposed to form 4 bonds, out of which it has formed 2 bonds and there are 2 lone pairs, right? Similarly here there are 2 lone pairs on the oxygen atom and here also. Now these 2 lone pairs, what they do is they bend the 2 bonds inwards. Right, so what is happening? For example, if this was my alcohol and there is these two lone pairs, they are bending my bond inwards. So what will happen? There would be a very small reduction in the angle. Here the angle becomes 108.5 degree. What it should ideally be? It should be 109.2 degrees, since we have assumed that it is sp3 and it is tetrahedral in structure. So it should be 109.2 degree, but instead it shows 108.5 degree, which is a little less than the tetrahedral angle. Now what is the reason? I'm sorry. The reason is that the two lone pairs have bent the bonds inwards. Same thing happens in phenol. Phenol, again, the lone pairs are bending the bonds inwards, but because of this benzene ring, this ring is bulky in nature. So the bend is not as much as it was here in the alcohols. So here also the angle is almost equal to the tetrahedral angle. But what about ethers, since we are more concerned about ethers here? In ethers, I'll draw it again. There were two lone pairs here and both were bending them inwards. At the same time, there were repulsive forces between the two R groups. Right, both the groups on the two sides of the oxygen are bulky R groups. So there has to be the repulsion between the two R groups. Now these two repulsions were found to be stronger than the forces of lone pair. Now imagine what is happening. There is a push from both the sides here so that the bond might bend inwards, and at the same time there is going to be repulsion from these two groups and this is going to open outwards. So what will happen here? Instead, since the repulsive forces were more, the force of these lone pairs was totally outshadowed, and here the angle increases and it is actually 101.7 degrees. I will quickly sum up here that it is expected that since oxygen is sp3 hybridized, it should have a tetrahedral angle which is 109.2 degrees. But due to the repulsion or due to the bending of the lone pairs inwards, the angle is a little less in alcohols, almost same in phenols, but in ethers it actually increases because there is more repulsion from the two alkyl groups present. Let's talk about the nomenclature of ethers. I will talk about the common names that are given to the ethers or the general names that are given, and the IUPAC both. So if I take an example, CH3OCH3, this is the simplest of the ethers. Now what do you have to do is you have to identify both the alkyl groups. I have a methyl group here and I have a methyl group here. So now as per my common system or the common name, what is going to be the name for this structure? This is going to be di, because there are two methyl groups present. I will call it as dimethyl ether. Right. Similarly, if I have, let's say like this, so I have to identify my two alkyl groups. This is ethyl and this is also ethyl. So I'll call it as diethyl ether. Now what will happen if the two alkyl groups are different? That means we talked about the different unsymmetrical ethers. For example, if I have a compound like this, now again please remember, identify your alkyl groups. This you know is methyl and this you know is ethyl. Now again you will write down the common name like this only, wherein you will write down the name of both the alkyls and then you will suffix it by adding ether. But you have to write it alphabetically. So out of ethyl and methyl, which comes alphabetically first? It is ethyl. So it becomes ethyl methyl ether. So what do you have to keep in mind is that it has to be alphabetically placed. So that is my keyword here. Similarly, if I have a structure like this, right, I have a methyl group here, and which is this group? I just said this is a phenyl group. So out of methyl and phenyl, which is alphabetically preferred, it is going to be methyl phenyl ether. I hope it is clear. Now let's talk about the more important thing about the naming of the ethers, that is IUPAC. Now what is the IUPAC and how do we decide, and what are the basic rules that we need to follow? For example, if I'm talking about any ether, the prefix for ether is alkoxy. What is it? It is alkoxy. Now for example, I am saying let's write down the name for this structure, right? Now what you have to do is that one of the R group is to be taken with the oxygen. Since here both the alkyl groups are same, so whichever one I will take, I can take it with oxygen. That is going to be completely same for both the cases. Now the one which is with oxygen is called as alkoxy. I'm repeating again, you have to take one alkyl group with the oxygen and that group will be called as alkoxy, and the remaining alkyl group is the part of the parent alkane chain, right? So if I have to name this, how many carbons are there in the alkoxy group? It is 1. So I will call it as methoxy, and this is 1 carbon alkane, so this is going to be methoxy methane, right? Now if I have one more structure like this, now again I have made a very symmetrical ether. Here there are both the alkyl groups on the opposite sides of the oxygen are same. So again what will I do? I will club one of the alkyl group with the oxygen. This would be getting the name of the alkoxy. How many carbons are here? There are 2. So I will call it as ethoxy, and there is 2 carbons in the remaining chain, so it is ethoxy ethane. I have a structure like this wherein I have an unsymmetrical alkane. The rule says that, I will highlight it, that the group with less number of carbon atoms is to be taken as alkoxy. So how will you decide which group is to be taken with the alkoxy and which is going to be my alkane parent chain? The group with the lesser number of carbons. So here in this example I have 1 carbon here, and the other side of the oxygen there are 2. So which is going to be alkoxy? This is going to be alkoxy. And what is the number of the carbon atoms present in the alkoxy? It is 1. So I will write it as methoxy. And what is the 2 carbon chain called as? Ethane. Right, so please remember this rule and the naming would be very easy. Now let's talk about this structure. This is C6H5OCH3, or I can draw it like this. Now again, one side of oxygen you have 6 carbon ring, and one side of oxygen you have just 1 carbon chain. So which is going to be your alkoxy group? This is going to be your alkoxy group. This is called as methoxy, and which is your parent chain here? It is a benzene. So it becomes methoxy benzene. Also remember that the common name for this is anisole. In the questions it might be given to you the common name, and you'll have to do some conversion or any other test that you need to do, and the name is given to be anisole. So you have to remember what is anisole. Anisole is methoxy benzene. Now what about this? This is again which is going to be your alkoxy group. This is going to be your alkoxy group. So this is ethoxy. Since the alkoxy group is having 2 carbons, this is ethoxy, and which is your chain? It is ethoxy benzene. Now again you have to remember the common name for ethoxy benzene. It is called phenitol. So methoxy benzene is anisole, ethoxy benzene is phenitol. Let's talk about few more examples, after which the entire concept of the naming of ethers would be clear. Now this is the structure here. On one side of the oxygen you have 1 carbon, on the other side it is 3. Now definitely which is going to be my alkoxy group? This is going to be my alkoxy group. But at the same time, the alkoxy group is not attached to the terminal carbon. It is attached to a center carbon. So what you need to do is you need to write down the numbers, or you have to number the alkane chain. So this is going to be 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So where is your alkoxy group present? It is present at the 2nd position. So you will call it as 2-methoxy. How many carbons in the alkane chain? It is 3. So it is 2-methoxy propane, right? Now in the next structure, there is a 6 carbon chain on one side and there is 7 on the other. So as per the rule, this lesser number carbon chain would be called as the alkoxy. So it is going to be this now, right? It doesn't matter if it is even a aromatic ring, it has to be the number of carbon atoms that has to be counted. So this becomes, what is C6H5? It is phenyl. So once it becomes alkoxy, this is going to be phenoxyheptane. So yes, again, the terminal carbon of the alkane chain is attached to my ether, so I do not need to number. Now the next, here again there are 6 carbons and this side there is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Right? So which one is going to be your alkoxy chain? This one, because it is having 5 carbons. So here is your chain. Now since I have to name this, I have to figure out where my functional group is. This is my functional group, right? So I have to start numbering. I'm repeating, I have to start numbering from where my functional group starts. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3 and this is 4. So now in this chain, this is 3-methyl. What is 4 carbon? It is butyl, but this is an alkoxy group. This is going to be 3-methyl butoxy. And what is C6H5? It is benzene. C6H5 is called as phenyl when it is being taken as a substituent. But whenever it is your parent chain, it is going to be benzene. Now this structure. Now what is happening here? There are 2 ether groups present. So what you will do is you will number your longest chain here, which is this. This is 1, 2. It doesn't matter from which side you start numbering. So this is going to be, this is a methoxy group. This is a methoxy group. So you will write 1, 2 dimethoxy, and which is the longest carbon chain here? It is 2, which is ethane. Right? Now, in the next structure, if the structure is given to you like this, now let's change it a little bit. Let's remove the ring. Let's make it cyclohexane. Now it is given like this. Now this is 2 carbons and this is your entire group. So definitely this is going to be your alkoxy. Now in this structure, you have 2 substituents. One is a nitro group. The other is an ethoxy group. So remember, whenever you have to number them, you have to again take them alphabetically. So from alphabetically, which is first, this is going to be 1 and this position is going to be 2. So it is going to be 1 ethoxy, 2 nitro cyclohexane. Right? Now what about this? Here you have an ethoxy group. And on this carbon you have 2 methyl groups. So please remember the rule: the more substituted carbon gets lower, or let's say gets higher preference. Whenever you are dealing with a ring and you are confused between the number or from where to start the numbering, which one is to be given the preference, you don't have to go alphabetically. In this case, the more substituted carbon always gets the higher preference. So now my first position goes here, the second is here. But while writing, we'll definitely follow the alphabetical order. This is methyl and this is ethoxy. So what we'll do is, it is 2 ethoxy. At one position there are 2 methyl, so I'll write 1 dimethyl and then it will be cyclohexane. Right? Quickly discuss the physical properties of ether and let's compare them with the corresponding hydrocarbons and alcohols. So if I talk about these, this is my hydrocarbon, right? And this is non-polar. Why is it non-polar? Because it has only hydrophobic groups. Now when I talk about ethers, definitely oxygen is having more electronegativity than the other 2 carbons. So this is going to be negative, these are going to be positive and positive. Though the magnitude might vary as depending upon the number of carbons present, but still we'll say that these are polar. Now what about this? This is definitely polar because it is having OH group. Now if I just write what are the basic intermolecular forces of attraction present, since this molecule is completely non-polar, we say that van der Waals forces of attraction are present because it is a non-polar molecule. This is a polar molecule, so I will say there are dipole-dipole interactions present. And what about here? This is going to be hydrogen bond, right? So now what is happening is that from an hydrocarbon to ether to an alcohol, the strength of intermolecular forces of attraction are increasing. What is IMF? I have written it for intermolecular forces of attraction. They are increasing. So since the strength of the bond is increasing, we'll say the boiling point also increases, right? So ether as when and compared to an hydrocarbon or an alcohol, ether is having more boiling point than a hydrocarbon of the corresponding mass, but it is still having lesser boiling point than a corresponding alcohol. Now if I draw the structure of ether, let's just make the general form, right? Now what is happening when you add it to a molecule of, or you add it in the aqueous medium, this is the two molecules, the two lone pairs on oxygen. Oxygen is negatively charged, here it is positively charged, so it forms a bond here. Similarly, it forms a bond here. So one molecule of ether is forming two intermolecular hydrogen bonds. Also, if I say, just to conclude, that as the number of R groups, or not, if not the number of carbon atoms in ethers increases, or I can say as the size of R group increases, what is happening? The hydrophobic groups are increasing, right? Hydrophobic group increases. So what will happen to the solubility? The solubility in water will decrease. So what points are to be remembered is that when you talk about the intermolecular forces of attraction, ethers have lesser intermolecular forces of attraction as compared to an alcohol. So the boiling point is also less from the alcohols, but it is definitely more than your hydrocarbon. And similarly, since there are two alkyl groups, that means two hydrophobic, two non-polar groups present in an ether, the solubility is also low. Let's begin with the preparation of ethers. There are two methods. The first one is the dehydration of alcohols. Now you have seen that the alcohols undergo dehydration in the presence of protic acids like H2SO4, H3PO4, etc. And they end up giving you an alkene. We have done the mechanism also, right? Now there is another thing that you have to always keep in mind while writing the products for a reaction, that whenever you are writing the products of the dehydration of alcohols, they depend upon the conditions. Now what conditions am I talking about? This is my alcohol. Now if you are doing the dehydration under the protic acid at a very high temperature like 443 Kelvin, it will give you an alkene. But if the same reaction is being conducted at a lower temperature of 413 Kelvin, it gives you an ether. And this occurs via SN2 mechanism. Now let's have a look at the mechanism and how it occurs. Now I will again talk about the mechanism, which is the preparation of ethers through the dehydration of alcohols. Now what is here? Here I have taken an alcohol, and this H plus is coming from the acid, the protic acid that I have taken in the reaction. Now what will happen is I will have a protonated alcohol, right? Now once this protonated alcohol again reacts with the molecule of an alcohol, the lone pair from the other molecule will go and attack this carbon, because this entire group will go. right? Oxygen is highly electronegative and it is having a positive charge. So this molecule will leave and this carbon will get a positive charge. And for this positive charge, this lone pair will go and attack from here, right? So what will I end up getting? I will get a ether which has an extra proton here attached at the oxygen, along with the water that was left from here, Now, in the third step, this was the product that I had received. Now this oxygen is again electronegative and it is having a positive charge, so this bond pair will leave. It will give its electron back to the oxygen so that it can have its lone pair back, and here it would be my ether, right? Now this reaction is occurring at a lower temperature of 413 Kelvin. So you have to remember that this reaction, if the question says that you have to do the dehydration of the alcohol, you have to have consider the temperature that is being taken. If the temperature is 443 Kelvin, then you will do the formation of alkene, and if the temperature is lower, you will end up forming a ether. Now this method is also used for the preparation of ethers only for primary alkyl groups. I will mention it here, primary alkyl groups. Because if I am taking secondary and tertiary alcohols, and you try to do the dehydration, now what will happen? Because of this crowd here, it would be sterically hindered and the reaction would be unsuccessful. What will happen? Elimination will compete over substitution. This we had done in the previous chapter also. Elimination will compete over substitution and the end product would be alkene. So when we were saying that at lower temperature an ether would be formed, I was specifically talking about the primary alcohols only and not for the secondary and tertiary, because they will end up yielding an alkene. Second method of preparation of ethers is Williamson synthesis of ethers. Alright, hello students. Now let's talk about Williamson's ether synthesis. As we all know, this reaction occurs when there is a reaction between an alcohol with an alkyl halide in the presence of a strong base. And what is formed? An ether is formed. So if I just write it in a little detailed form, this is an alcohol. The moment it reacts with NaOH, which is a strong base, what happens is the H from here combines with the OH from the base and it leads to the release of water and it gives you a compound which is RONA. This is called as sodium alkoxide, which is a very strong nucleophile. And as we know, it will attack the alkyl. Now if I try to react it with an alkyl halide, this alkoxide ion will attack alkyl halide. How? Halogen we all know is negative. Alkyl halide will be positive. What about RO? Alkoxide ion is negative and Na is positive. So positive will react with negative and this will give you sodium halide. Plus what else would be formed? There would be the formation of an ether. Now comes that this ether, if R is equal to R dash, then the ether would be a symmetrical ether. And in case of a symmetrical ether, there won't be any issues. For example, if I take CH3OH, or herein we can take CH3ONA plus CH3Cl, since both of them are the same alkyl groups that are being used, it can directly form CH3OCH3 with a byproduct of NaCl. But there would be a problem when we will talk about an unsymmetrical ether where R will not be equal to R dash. Alright, so when we are talking about unsymmetrical ether, there has to be some exceptions when we are treating this. For example, let's discuss all of them one by one. Ether will not be formed if the alkyl halide is tertiary. Why? Because if the alkyl halide that I am taking in the reaction is tertiary alkyl halides always prefer SN1. And we have already discussed above that the above reaction that we were talking about, the Williamson synthesis, it is undergoing SN2 mechanism as the strong nucleophile is attacking alkyl halide, right? So if I take an tertiary alkyl halide, the reaction will go through SN1 mechanism, which will not lead to the formation of an ether. So you can never ever place a tertiary alkyl halide for the formation of an ether. First point. Second, ether will never be formed if the alkyl halide is a aryl halide. For example, like this. As we all know, this will undergo resonance. So this will come here. What will be the next structure? The next structure would be and so on. So there would be a double bond, a partial double bond character between the carbon of the ring and the halogen group. Obviously, now when there is a partial double bond character between the carbon and the halogen will not leave easily. Right? So if it does not leave easily, the above reaction is again not possible. So Williamson ether synthesis will not be possible even if you take an aryl halide. It has to be an alkyl halide only. And the third case, it will again not occur if the alkyl halide is in this shape. For example, what will happen now? This will come here. This double bond will shift to the next carbon. So there would be a structure wherein there would be again a double bond character between the carbon and the halogen. So again the bond would be strong and halogen will not leave very easily. Hence this reaction, this will also not support Williamson synthesis. So please always remember that Williamson synthesis is not successful when you are taking alkyl halide as a tertiary one, aryl halide, or with a double bond character. So now let's take an example. Let's say if I have to prepare, let's say anisole. What is anisole? Anisole is methoxybenzene. What is the structure? It is, right? So now I have two options to prepare this anisole. One, I can either take my sodium phenoxide like this plus CH3Cl, or I can reverse the two things and I can take the two possible reactants like this. Now, as we discussed above, that whenever there would be an aryl halide, the reaction will not proceed. So again, in this option, I have a aryl halide and hence this will not lead to the formation of anisole. I have only the other option, which is sodium phenoxide and your methyl chloride to produce anisole. So now let's look at a question. The question says, write the names of the reagents and the equations for the preparation of the following by Williamson synthesis. The first question that is given is ethoxybenzene. What is ethoxybenzene? It is a benzene with an ethoxy group. This is also called as phenitol, right? So again, I have two options to prepare this. Let's say the first one is chlorobenzene plus ethyl phenoxide, or also I can prepare it by now you tell me which one is the correct one. When I am looking at this, in the very first case, I have an aryl halide, which we already saw that it is not able to produce the Williamson's, which is not able to undergo the Williamson synthesis reaction. So this will not lead to the formation of an ether, and whereas the second case will definitely lead to preparation of phenitol. Now when I talk about the second question where it says 2-methyl-2-methoxypropane, let's make the structure first. Propane means CH3, CCH3. On the second position, it's written a methoxy group and a methyl group on the same position. Now, if I try to make it, let's say we have two possibilities. One would be this. I can take my alkoxide ion as the tertiary one and I can prepare by adding CH3Cl. This can happen. This NaCl will react together and this will react with this and lead to the formation of the given product. And if I take the opposite one, which will be the tertiary halide, now what will happen? Now this is your tertiary halide, and as we know, it is highly reactive. It will lead to the formation of the most stable carbocation, and it will also prefer to undergo SN1 instead of SN2. This is a very strong base. It is basic in nature. So what will it do? It will facilitate the loss of HCl from the tertiary halide, right? So what will happen? Will it give this? No. Instead of this, it will lead to formation of an alkene, wherein we can say instead of undergoing SN2 reaction, it will undergo elimination reaction and result in the formation of an alkene. So now sometimes in the paper it is also asked what is the limitation of the Williamson's ether synthesis. So there is one limitation, that ditertiary butyl ether cannot be prepared. Do you agree? Why it cannot be prepared? Because the tertiary halides will undergo elimination instead of ether synthesis. That is CH3 what will happen if you will try to react this? Here it is a tertiary halide, and if you try to react a tertiary halide, it will undergo elimination reaction, right? So you can never prepare a ether or a ditertiary butyl ether with the help of this reaction. I hope this has given clarity to a lot of questions. Thank you. All the best. Let's come to the chemical properties of ethers. The very first type of reactions are those which involve the cleavage of carbon-oxygen bond in ethers. Now we know that ethers are least reactive functional groups. Right. Now since they are least reactive, the carbon-oxygen bond will only break under drastic conditions. Now what are these drastic conditions that you can take? You can take presence of excess of your halogen halide. Under these conditions, your carbon-oxygen bond in ether will break. What will happen? For example, if I take an ether like this and I add my halogen acid, remember it has to be in excess. Now what will happen is you will end up getting your alkyl halide plus your alcohol. Right? Now, if I take aromatic ether like this and I add HX here, I will always get a phenol and an alkyl halide. Under this condition, when you have an alkyl aryl ether and you take excess of halogen halide, the bond will always break here. Why? Because the carbon-oxygen bond that we are talking about here is very strong because of the partial double bond character. Remember this we have taken as a reason for many of the questions done previously. So this bond is not going to be cleaved very easily because there is a partial double bond character in this carbon and oxygen. So the bond will break here and it will always give you a phenol. Now what if I take an unsymmetrical ether like this? Then I have to decide where my halogen will attack and where my hydrogen ion will attack. Now for this I will share quick tips with you that you have to always remember. Whenever you have an alkyl halide or I say you have ether like this. Now this is an unsymmetrical ether. There is a smaller alkyl group and there is a bigger alkyl group. So you have to remember that whenever this will break, I have taken halogen halide here, this will be negative and this will be positive. Whenever this will break, this is my nucleophile, right? My iodide ion. The nucleophile will always attack to the side where there are lesser number of carbon atoms. This one was my lesser number of alkyl chain. the alkyl chain with lesser number of carbon atoms, this alkyl chain has more number of carbon atoms. So my nucleophile will go and attack the carbon which is lesser in number. So I will end up getting CH3I, and where this H will go, it will go to the other side. So it will be C2H5OH. Now why it has done like that? Just to reduce the steric hindrance. It was very easy for this iodide ion to go and attack a carbon which was easy to approach. Here, since there was more number of carbon atoms, there was a little more steric hindrance. Now this was one case. Now if I talk about another case, let's say I have carbon, I will take an unsymmetrical ether like this. Now what will happen? Now ideally, as I told you, this is having a smaller carbon group and this is having a larger carbon group. So my nucleophile should go and attack here, but no. What is going to happen here? Again, this is going to be positive, this is going to be negative. This iodide ion will go and attack my tertiary bulkier group. Now the question is why? Because when this will break, this will give me a tertiary carbocation, which we know is more stable than a primary carbocation. So my reaction is going through the process of formation of a carbocation. So obviously I will prefer the carbocation which is more stable in structure. So this is more stable. So now my iodide ion will go and attack the tertiary carbocation, and the other would be CH3OH. So this is an exception that you have to always learn, that whenever you have an unsymmetrical ether and both sided is a primary carbon group, then you will choose that the iodide or the nucleophile will go and attack at the position which has the lesser number of carbon atoms. But just in case there is one of the tertiary groups present on either of the side, then my nucleophile will go and attack the tertiary carbocation, right? Now I am discussing the mechanism for both here. In the very first case, when there were two alkyl groups, neither of them were tertiary in nature, and it was attacking with the HI. HI will break from here, this will be negative and this will be positive. This lone pair will go and attack my positive side. So what will I get? I will get CH3O, and it is an oxonium ion where the oxygen has got the positive charge along with the hydrogen with the other group of the ether that was already present, and iodine minus is free in nature for to attack. This is my nucleophile now. When my nucleophile now attacks this compound, it will undergo a SN2 mechanism. Remember, SN2 mechanism is one which occurs in one step, that the leaving group has not left yet, but the attacking group has got attached here. So iodine will now attack here. Once this attaches here, this will break from here because this is a smaller group. This will be CH3I and this would be C2H5OH. On the contrary, when you have a tertiary group present on one side of the ether and you reacted with HI, the very first thing due to the SN1 mechanism would be that it will yield a tertiary carbocation here, right? And this is very stable. Now my nucleophile is ready and it will attack the carbocation, and this will yield into the nucleophile going and attacking the tertiary carbocation. Right, so these are the two important cases that you need to remember. And the third one is that whenever you have an alkyl aryl ether, you will always end up getting the phenol. Now I will discuss one question with you. In this question, you have to write down the product that would be formed when you treat the given ether with HI. Now also I would like to mention here that since the topic was that we can add any halogen halide, so I have the possibility of adding HI, HBr and HCl. And we say that the order or the ease of the reaction is maximum when it is done with HI, then with HBr, and least with HCl, right? Now, so in this ether, on one side I have a carbon alkyl chain of 2 carbons. Here it is the bigger one. So where will my nucleophile go? My nucleophile will go and attack the smaller one. So it will be CH3, CH2I plus, and my H will go to this to form an alcohol. So this will be, right? Now talk about this. Here on one side I have a tertiary group, one side I have a primary group. So what will be the condition? My negative will go and attack the tertiary condition. So it will be C, CH3, CH2, CH3, CH3 and I here, right? plus CH3, CH2, CH2OH. Now this one, from where the bond will break. Can the bond break from here? No, because there would be a partial double bond charge. So what will I end up getting? I will get my phenol plus benzyl iodide. Here, now here it is 3, here it is 1. So clearly my nucleophile will attack the smaller carbon chain. So it will be CH3Br, CH3, CH2, CH2OH. What about this? Here also I will have my phenol plus C2H5Br. Last properties that we need to discuss are the electrophilic substitution reactions of aromatic ethers. Now what we have to do in this is we have to remember that what are ethers? Ether is this group. We know that these are activating groups, OR, and they are also ortho and para-directing. Once you remember this, the entire reactions are very easy. If you have to do the halogenation, you will add bromine. What will happen? You will end up getting an ortho product and a para product. Bromine will attack the ortho and the para both. And out of these, which is going to be the major product? The para one. This is always going to be minor. Similarly, if you want to do the Friedel-Crafts alkylation or acylation, I've added in the presence of a Lewis base, Lewis acid, anhydrous AlCl3 and CH3Cl. CH3 group got attached at the ortho position and at the para position, and again my major product is the para group. Similarly, we'll do the acylation. Now, what about nitration? You need to add the nitrating mixture, which is H2SO4 and HNO3. Again, the reaction will occur at both ortho and para position. Nitronium ion will go and attack the ortho position, and this would be the para thing. This compound is called as anisole. So this is going to be 2 nitroanisole. This is going to be 4 nitroanisole. Similarly, you can name this. This is going to be 2 bromoanisole. This is going to be 4 bromoanisole.